All right. So we are getting to it. Hello, everybody. My name is Casey, and this is kind of just a shorter rundown version of a little discussion we're going to have about perspective in art and kind of just viewpoint and how it is used as a great tool to kind of help set the stage, kind of help set the scene and all. Now, towards the end, there will be a short little question area. This is a little bit more modified, where this lesson could be ended up being used in e-learning. This could end up being in a museum classroom as part of a field trip, or even just kind of flexible enough to kind of have that backbone, just go where it needs to be in terms of a lesson, or just even a beginning portion of a good history lesson. So, one of a good artwork that I definitely want to talk about first. We're going to start off with this piece by Edward Lloyd Weeks. Now, there are a couple things going on in this specific artwork. Kind of just take a couple seconds, just get a general look at it, kind of look what's going on. We have a couple things going on. One thing that I want to kind of bring up while we're talking about perspective and different art pieces throughout as we are doing it is I want to bring up the notion of people. Pay attention to the people. Where are they facing? Where are their heads facing? Where are they looking? It is definitely a important tool, or a very used tool that artists definitely have taken advantage of, well, not taken advantage of, but have used very often to kind of help either set the scene, put viewers' eyes in motion to kind of help move your eyes around the canvas itself. Now, there are a couple things with this. Now, in terms of the buildings, they are kind of set at an angle and kind of going towards the left, kind of as like a closing in V. Now, in terms of that and perspective, it helps push the scene a little bit further back on the canvas so it's not as flat. Now, in terms of buildings and arches and walls, those are used very often with perspective and kind of just helping either make it flat, push it back, or drive the eyes. Now, this one is also a very good example. This is a very good example of it being flat, but also still having depth. Now, back to this one with the people. This is a very good scene because the walls are driving into the left. It's bringing either your eyes to the left or they're bringing it to the right, depending on which way you're looking. You could start at either side, but also in the middle on how the people are projected. They're all kind of looking towards the right, towards this swordsmanship man or person, whoever they might be. They are having a sword and they're maybe having a discussion, maybe having an argument. You really can't tell in terms of body language and facial features. However, all the faces are drawn towards this. So the buildings are bringing you either to the left or the right, but you're looking at the people. So let's say we're going to the left and we're looking at all these faces and they're bringing you back to the right. So it's kind of that circular motion of bringing you back and forth, but letting you look and soak in the artwork. Now with the people, with this one. This work by Raphael is a very large piece, and in terms of looking at all the people, there are so many details that you can take in. Now, in terms of perspective, it kind of looks a little flat. All the people are kind of just layered on top of each other, while in the one that we were looking at previously, they were kind of spaced out. Somebody was sitting down, somebody was standing. One looked a little bit more pushed back in the distance. Now with this one being a little bit more flat, Raphael has used arches and architecture to help with the perspective and adding the depth. You see all these arches and how the angles are going back towards the vanishing point. And in terms of vanishing point, it is simply just the point on the horizon where all things either converge or disappear. Think of city streets when you're looking down a driveway or looking down a really long road and how it just goes towards the back and then disappears where you can't see anymore. Kind of like that. It's Very, very useful in terms of setting the stage, adding perspective, deciding on where you want to layer your pieces for art. Now that you can see with the arches, and it builds up into the front arch itself, which again, you can also use that as a tool and kind of bring your eyes around and look at all the minute details. There's so much going on, but with the architecture and all the different shapes, it draws your eyes all over, but not in such a forceful way where you can kind of just gaze along and take it all in without being like jutted back and forth. Another way is to also look at the people again in this. It helps kind of bring you into a couple different scenes. There's a couple people back here. There might be a scene up here going on. There's a scene up here and in the middle, but since everybody is looking in different directions, it kind of lets your eyes wander, but also soak it in. Now this one is kind of going more into the interior perspective, more of a 2-point perspective. You kind of have the lines of the building pushing it back, the lines in here kind of bringing you over, and that rug, you could say the lines are bringing you back. Same with the door, and help adding that depth. Now, in terms of perspective, you could honestly just break it down to simple lines. In terms of exterior perspective, a good way is to look at buildings. Sometimes they can be overwhelming, sometimes they can be underwhelming. It depends on how you're looking at it and how you are taking it in, or depending on the city. Now, a lot of times with exterior perspective, there will be more than one vanishing point. Such as with this one, you could see the buildings pushing back and the road pushing back. Maybe we have one over here. And since we're looking at the buildings of more of an angle, you can kind of assume that maybe one is off to the left and the other one is further back. Not as more of like a flat building, as if you were looking at it face on. It kind of helps add the depth of the perspective when you're outside as well. Now this is also a good example of when you're looking at the flat on, such as this one. Maybe the horizon line is right in front of you. Maybe you're not looking at it above with bird's eye view, or below, such as worm's eye view. This is a good example where the horizon is a little bit pitched up, and with the bird's eye view, you can kind of tell. Now you can kind of point out the perspective going back here, and since it's more of a bird's eye view, but not directly up above, they're adding that depth, kind of bringing up the horizon line and kind of more having you look at an angle with this. Now, in terms of perspective, these have just been a couple examples about how it's been able to add depth, maybe helps with the view on the angle in which you're looking at it. And a great example that the Art Institute of Chicago that we have here at this museum is this famous artwork. And in terms of everything, you can kind of see the different perspectives and the different points of view used on how to help add depth and kind of set the scene. Now we can take a couple minutes and analyze this as a class, but first I do have a couple questions for everybody. Just kind of either we can partner up depending on that, or we could do an open discussion, however works, or however gets more participation from the class or the group. So you can either pair up, we can do a survey. Now, depending on whether this lesson plan is doing e-learning, we could just either do breakout rooms or in person, kind of just get a feel of how everybody is feeling. I'm kind of just thinking of maybe are there any other examples of perspective and well-known artworks that maybe you've seen at the museum? And if you haven't been to the museum, specifically this one, maybe just think of other different artworks that maybe that you might know, or just maybe you've seen before, or you can even describe. And then how do you think it might differ in different art styles? Thinking maybe pop art, maybe how objects are depicted. Do you think that helps with the perspective and